2 years after my wife died, my daughter sued me for $2 million. Immediately, everything fell apart. In her eyes, I was just a helpless old man unable to fight back. But then a lawyer called me and said, "I found a secret USB drive your wife hid in the safe. Come here immediately and don't tell anyone." When I opened that USB drive, a secret buried for over 30 years was revealed, and then everything changed. My daughter thought she was in control, but what was revealed would destroy her. I'm incredibly grateful you're here with me today. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from right now? Drop a comment below and let me know. It helps me understand who's joining me on this journey, and I read every single one. Quick note: this story weaves together fictional elements designed for reflection and insight. Any similarity to actual names or places is coincidental. What matters most is the lesson we can all take away from it. The call came on a Thursday afternoon in early February 2025, while I was in my workshop behind the house sanding down an old oak table for Mrs. Collins from the chess club. The workshop had been my refuge for the past 16 months. It smelled of sawdust and linseed oil, and the winter light slanted through the single window in golden bars that caught the floating wood particles like snow. I'd built this space 30 years ago, when Kimberly and I first bought the house on Maple Ridge Drive. Back then, it was supposed to be for weekend projects. Now, it was where I spent most of my days. I ran the sandpaper along the grain, feeling the wood smooth beneath my calloused palms. Mrs. Collins had brought the table in last week, saying her late husband had made it in 1987, and she couldn't bear to throw it away. I understood that. These days, I understood a lot about not letting go. At 63, my hands weren't as steady as they used to be, but they still knew their way around wood. Kimberly used to joke that I could fix anything except a broken heart. She'd been right about that. 16 months since I'd lost her to cancer, and I still set 2 plates out for dinner before remembering. The work kept me going. On Mondays, I played chess with Mrs. Collins at the community center. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I taught a free woodworking class to anyone who wanted to learn how to fix a wobbly chair or patch a hole in drywall. Wednesdays, I visited Kimberly's grave. The rest of the time, I stayed in the workshop turning broken things into whole ones, wishing I could do the same for myself. Brianna, my 37-year-old daughter, hadn't called in 16 months. Not since the funeral, where she'd stood at the edge of the cemetery, in a black dress and expensive sunglasses, her arms crossed, separated from me by 20 feet and a lifetime of something I couldn't name. After they lowered Kimberly into the ground, Brianna had gotten into her BMW and driven away. I hadn't heard her voice since. I told myself she was grieving in her own way. I told myself she'd call when she was ready. I told myself a lot of things that made the silence easier to bear. The phone rang at 2:30. I set down the sandpaper and wiped my hands on my jeans, leaving dusty streaks across the denim. My phone sat on the workbench next to a half-empty mug of coffee gone cold. I didn't recognize the number, but the area code was local. "Hello, Raymond Fletcher." The voice was professional, clipped. Male. "Speaking. It's James Rodriguez. We need to talk." James Rodriguez had been our family lawyer for 15 years. He'd handled our wills, the trust fund setup, the deed transfer, when we refinanced the house. A good man. Thorough. Not the type to call without reason. I glanced at the clock. "Is everything all right? I need you to come to my office tomorrow at 9:30 in the morning." His voice carried a weight I'd never heard before. "Don't tell anyone about this meeting. Not Brianna. Not anyone." My stomach tightened. "James, what's going on?" "This is about Kimberly." I sat down on the workshop stool, the wood creaking under my weight. "Kimberly's been gone for 16 months. I know." A pause. "Raymond, your wife left something for you. A USB drive. She gave it to me 3 years ago with very specific instructions." "What kind of instructions?" "I could only give it to you if one particular event occurred." Another pause, longer this time. That event just happened. My mouth went dry. What event? Brianna filed a lawsuit this morning. The workshop seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the workbench to steady myself. A lawsuit against who? Against you. She's challenging the trust fund. Claims you manipulated Kimberly into setting it up, that you had undue influence over your wife's decisions in her final years. The words didn't make sense. I heard them individually, but strung together they became nonsense syllables, a foreign language I couldn't parse. That's not possible, I said. The trust fund was Kimberly's idea. She wanted to make sure. I know what she wanted, Raymond. I helped her set it up. James's voice softened slightly. But Brianna is claiming otherwise. You'll receive official court papers tomorrow. I wanted to give you a heads up before that happens. I stood, paced 3 steps to the window, stared out at the backyard, where snow clung to the bare branches of the maple tree. Kimberly had planted that tree the year Brianna was born, 37 years ago. Why would she do this? I heard the crack in my voice, couldn't stop it. I don't know, but Kimberly knew. James let that sit for a moment. The USB she left contained something she wanted you to see if this day ever came. She predicted it, Raymond. 2 years before she passed, my legs felt weak. I leaned against the workbench. How could she know? Maud, come to my office tomorrow, 9:30. I'll give you the USB and we'll talk about your options. He paused. Raymond, whatever's on that drive, Kimberly wanted you to have it. She spent her last months making sure you'd be protected. Protected from my own daughter. I'll be there, I managed. And Raymond, don't try to contact Brianna. Not until we've talked. The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, listening to the silence. Outside, a crow called from the maple tree. Inside, the workshop that had been my refuge 16 months suddenly felt like a cage. I looked at the half-finished table, at Mrs. Collins's husband's careful joinery from 1987, at the smooth surface I'd been preparing to oil and polish. I thought about Brianna standing at her mother's funeral, distant and cold. I thought about 16 months of silence. And I thought about Kimberly dying of cancer, using her final days to leave me a message she knew I'd need. The USB drive. Whatever was on it, my wife had seen this coming. She'd known our daughter would turn against me. The question that burned through my chest as I sank back onto the stool wasn't what Brianna wanted. It was what Kimberly had discovered that made her prepare for this moment. I sat in the workshop as the February light faded to gray, my hands resting on the oak table, sawdust coating my fingers like ash. 16 months of quiet grief had just shattered. Tomorrow I would walk into James Rodriguez's office and learn what secret my wife had been keeping. Tomorrow I would understand why the woman I'd loved for 40 years had spent her dying days building a defense against our own child. But tonight, all I could do was sit in the gathering darkness and wonder how my family had broken so completely without my ever noticing the cracks. Friday morning arrived cold and gray. I'd barely slept, spending most of the night at the kitchen table with coffee and unanswered questions. By dawn, I'd given up, pretending rest would come. James Rodriguez's law office occupied the 3rd floor of a historic brick building downtown, overlooking the frozen Cedarwood River. I parked on Main Street and walked the last block, my breath forming white clouds in the February air. The town was just waking up, early risers hurrying into the coffee shop, mountains in the distance sharp against the pale sky. The reception area was warm. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, framed diplomas. A young woman at the front desk smiled. "Mr. Fletcher, Mr. Rodriguez is expecting you." James stood as I entered. 45, clean-shaven, wearing a charcoal suit. We'd known each other 15 years, shared beers at 4th of July barbecues, talked about fishing and taxes. But this morning, there was no warmth in his handshake. Just professional gravity. "Raymond, thanks for coming. Didn't seem like I had much choice." He gestured to the chair. Behind him, the window framed the gray river. I sat down, and James pulled out a manila envelope sealed with red wax. Kimberly's signature stretched across the seal. Below it, a notary stamp dated March 2023. "Your wife gave this to me in March of 2023, James said quietly. "That was nearly 2 years ago, and 7 months before she passed away. She made me promise I'd only give it to you if Brianna sued you." I stared at the date. March 2023. Kimberly had been sick then, but still fighting, still planning. She'd known this moment would come even then. I opened the envelope. Inside was a USB drive and a folded sheet of notebook paper in Kimberly's careful handwriting. "Raymond, if you're reading this, Brianna has filed a lawsuit. I'm sorry you have to face this alone. The USB contains evidence. James will help you. Trust him. Protect Scarlett. She's innocent in all of this. I love you. Forgive me for the secrets. K. Who is Scarlett?" I heard my voice from a distance. James leaned back, choosing his words carefully. "Scarlett Reed, 41 years old. She runs a tailoring shop on Old Market Street." He paused. "She's Kimberly's stepdaughter, and your biological daughter." The office tilted. I gripped the chair arms, needing something real to hold on to. "That's impossible. I don't have another daughter." "Ah, you do." James pulled out a photograph. A woman with auburn hair standing in front of a shop window, scissors in hand, smiling. I stared at the photo. Something in the shape of her face, the line of her jaw, made my chest tightening. I've never seen this woman in my life. "Kimberly met her 4 years ago at a funeral," James said gently. "She learned the truth then. She started helping Scarlett financially, $800 a month for 3 years. That's what triggered Brianna's suspicion. $800 a month. I'd never noticed. But then again, I wouldn't have. Kimberly had always managed the household finances. She paid the bills, balanced the checkbook, handled the savings. I trusted her completely. If she'd been transferring money to someone, I never would have seen it, not unless I'd gone looking. And I never had reason to look." James pulled out another stack of papers. "These are the court documents Brianna filed yesterday." I took them with numb fingers. Certain phrases jumped out. Undue influence, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. "She's claiming you manipulated Kimberly," James said. "That you used your wife's illness to pressure her into including Scarlett in the trust. She wants the trust dissolved and the assets redistributed." "How much?" "She's $1.65 million. You receive 60%, Brianna 25%, Scarlett 15%. Brianna wants Scarlett removed entirely." I flipped through the pages. Beside Brianna's name appeared another Craig Hutchinson. "Her ex-husband," James said. "They divorced 18 months ago, but they're working together. Both are listed as plaintiffs. Divorced but working together. Planning this for 2 years." While Kimberly lay dying. "Raymond, did you know about Scarlett before this moment?" "No." "Did you pressure Kimberly to include her in the trust?" "I didn't even know the trust included anyone but Brianna and me." James nodded slowly. "Kimberly kept this from you deliberately. She protected you by keeping you ignorant." "What's on the USB?" I don't know. She only said you'd understand when the time came." James leaned forward. "Raymond, you need to take this seriously. Brianna has Preston Kane, he's aggressive. They'll argue Kimberly wasn't in her right mind, that you took advantage of her illness. They'll make you look like a manipulator who inserted a stranger into your family's inheritance." But I didn't." "I know, but we need to prove it." He tapped the USB. "Start there. Watch whatever's on this. Then call me." I stood up. The USB went into my coat pocket. The letter I folded into my wallet next to Kimberly's photo. "James, if I have another daughter, why didn't Kimberly tell me?" His hand briefly touched my shoulder. "Maybe she was protecting you both. Maybe she knew some things can't be fixed until they break completely. He met my eyes. Go home. Watch the USB, then we'll figure out what comes next. I left with the USB burning a hole in my pocket and lawsuit papers in my hand. The cold February wind cut through me as I walked to my truck. Main Street was busier now, people living ordinary lives. Mine was no longer ordinary. Somewhere in this town was a daughter I never knew existed. A woman named Scarlett Reed with my blood in her veins and my wife's protection surrounding her. And somewhere else was the daughter I'd raised, who was now trying to take everything Kimberly had left behind. I climbed into my truck and sat there, engine running. The USB felt like it was burning. The lawsuit papers sat beside me. My wife had died protecting a secret. And now I had to decide whether that secret was worth defending. I didn't watch the USB that night. I couldn't. I sat in the living room until past 11, staring at the small device on the coffee table, afraid of what my wife's voice would tell me. The house was dark, except for the lamp beside the couch. The lawsuit papers sat on the kitchen counter. The letter from Kimberly remained in my wallet close to my heart, but the USB stayed on the coffee table untouched. I kept thinking about the last time I'd heard Kimberly's voice. October 2023 in the hospice room. She'd been too weak to speak above a whisper. "Take care of yourself," she'd said. Not "I love you." Not goodbye. What else had she known? At 11:15, I picked up the USB and walked to the desk where my old Dell laptop sat. The laptop took 3 minutes to boot up. My hands shook as I plugged in the drive. A folder appeared for Raymond. Inside were 8 files. Video 1 for Raymond, 12:03. Video 2 for Brianna, 8:47. Letter for Scarlett.pdf evidence 1, audio_recording, October 2021.mp3 evidence 2. Financial_history.xlsx evidence 3, email_correspondence.zip evidence 4, trust_documents.pdf evidence 5, medical_records.pdf. 8 files representing God knew how many hours of my wife's final days spent building this archive. I clicked on video 1. The screen was black, then Kimberly appeared, and my breath stopped. She sat in our bedroom, afternoon light behind her. The timestamp in the corner read March 15th, 2023, 16 months ago now, and 7 months before she passed away in October. This version was thinner, hollow-cheeked, pale. A knitted cap covered her head. Her hands rested in her lap. "Raymond, if you're watching this, Brianna has sued you. I'm so sorry." She paused, looking down, then back. "I need to tell you about Scarlett Reed. 4 years ago, June 2021, I attended Dorothy Collins's funeral. You remember her? She volunteered at the library with me. I met her granddaughter Scarlett. We talked, and she mentioned her mother Gina. Gina Reed. The name hit me like a fist. Gina Reed. Summer of 1983. I'd been 21 working construction. Gina had been a summer fling, barely 4 months. We'd parted ways when she left for college. I remembered you mentioning Gina once years ago. So I asked Scarlett questions. The dates lined up. Raymond Scarlett is your daughter. Born March 1984. Gina raised her alone and passed away in 2001. Dorothy raised Scarlett after that. I hit pause. The room spun. A daughter, 41 years old, living in the same town, and I'd never known. I pressed play. I confronted you in July 2021. You told me about Gina but swore you didn't know she'd had a child. I believed you, Raymond. I still believe you. You're not the kind of man who walks away from responsibilities. You simply didn't know. Her voice softened. So I reached out to Scarlett myself. Met her at her tailoring shop in August 2021. She's wonderful, Raymond. Kind, hardworking. She never asked me for anything, but she was struggling. Her grandmother had just passed, leaving debts and a small business barely staying afloat. So I started helping her. $800 a month. $800 a month for 3 years. More than $20,000. Brianna found out in October 2021. She looked at our bank statements and saw the transfers. She confronted me. It wasn't kind. She demanded I stop helping Scarlett. She said I was betraying our family giving money to a stranger. She threatened to tell you to make it seem like I'd been lying. Kimberly closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were wet. 2 months later, I was diagnosed with lung cancer. Stage 2. By June 2022, I was in remission. We thought I'd beaten it. I remembered that relief. Kimberly planting tomatoes, saying she wanted to taste something she'd grown herself. But in October 2022, it came back. Stage 3B. The oncologist recommended experimental immunotherapy combined with intensive chemotherapy. $180,000. Insurance wouldn't cover it. They only paid for standard treatment, not the advanced trial option. The doctors said it might give me another year, maybe 18 months. No guarantees. So I chose quality time with you over quantity. I chose to protect our future instead of chasing a maybe. My vision blurred. In November 2022, I set up the trust fund. $1.65 million. 60% to you, 25% to Brianna, 15% to Scarlett. I didn't tell you about Scarlett's share because I knew you'd argue. But Raymond, Scarlett deserved something. She's your daughter. Kimberly leaned closer. I started preparing this USB in December 2022 because I knew what was coming. Brianna had stopped visiting, stopped calling. She was angry about Scarlett. I realized she was going to wait until I was gone, then come after you. She was going to claim you manipulated me, that Scarlett was a fraud. So I gathered evidence. Everything you need to defend yourself is in these files. Audio recordings, financial documents, emails, proof that Brianna has been planning this lawsuit since I got sick. She reached toward the camera. To protect Scarlett Raymond. She didn't even know about the trust until after I died. This isn't her fault. It's not yours either. This is Brianna's choice. She's chosen greed over family. Her voice broke. I love you. I'm sorry you have to face this alone. James will help you. And when you meet Scarlett, please give her a chance. She deserves to know her father. The video ended. The screen went black. I sat staring at my reflection in the dark monitor. Behind me, the living room was exactly as it had been an hour ago. But everything had changed. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark street. Somewhere in this town, Scarlett Reed was sleeping, unaware that I'd just learned she existed. Somewhere else, Brianna was sleeping too, or maybe planning her next move. My wife had died protecting a daughter I never knew from a daughter who wanted to destroy us. Saturday afternoon, I stood outside a small tailor shop on Old Market Street, my heart pounding harder than it had in decades. Through the window, I could see a woman with auburn hair bent over a sewing machine. I'd been standing there for 10 minutes, maybe longer. My truck sat parked 3 spaces down. Around me, the street moved with weekend life couples, window shopping, a kid on a skateboard, coffee smell drifting from next door. Normal people doing normal things, while I stood frozen trying to figure out how to meet a daughter I never knew existed. The sign above read, Scarlett's Alterations and Custom Clothing, in faded gold lettering. Through the glass, I could see bolts of fabric, a cutting table, and the woman Scarlett working at an old Singer sewing machine. She was 41. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She wore a simple gray sweater and jeans, a tape measure draped around her neck. I'd rehearsed what to say on the drive over. None of it seemed right now. The bell chimed as I pushed the door open. Scarlett looked up from her work, her hands stilled on the fabric. For a moment, we just stared at each other across 15 feet of worn wooden floor. Her eyes were hazel, the same color as mine. Mr. Fletcher. Her voice was soft, careful. Not Dad. Not even Raymond. Scarlett, I hope this isn't a bad time. She set down the fabric, turned off the machine. No. I've been expecting you. She stood. Would you like to sit? There's a space in the back. The shop smelled like fabric and thread and lemon oil. She led me past the sewing machine to a small area behind a curtain. Two mismatched chairs faced each other across a coffee table made from an old door. On the wall, a framed photograph showed a younger Scarlett, with an older woman, her grandmother, I guessed. We sat. The silence stretched between us. Just Kimberly told me, I said finally. In a video, she left a USB drive with the lawyer. Scarlett's expression flickered. I didn't know she'd made a video. She made it 7 months before she passed. She told me about your mother, about Gina. Scarlett looked down at her hands. Small, delicate, the nails, short and practical. A seamstress's hands. I wasn't sure if you'd come. I needed to see you. I leaned forward. To know if... My mother died when I was 18. Scarlett said quietly. Car accident on I-25 during a snowstorm. Before that, she wrote me a letter. Told me to open it if anything happened to her. Inside, she explained about you. That you'd met the summer before I was born. That you didn't know about me. She didn't want to disrupt your life. She should have told me. The words came out harsh. I had a right to know. So maybe, but she was 21 and scared. And from what Kimberly told me, you'd already moved on. You'd met someone else. Scarlett met my eyes. So my mother didn't want to be the mistake that ruined your happiness. Gina Reed. Summer of 1983. I remembered her in flashes, dark hair, quick laugh. We'd been young and careless. When she left for college in August, we'd promised to write. Neither of us ever did. And after my mother died, my grandmother raised me. Scarlett continued. Dorothy Collins. She lived on the east side, worked at the library. She never said anything bad about you. I saw her name in Kimberly's video. Dorothy passed away in 2021. June. Lung cancer. Scarlett's voice wavered. Kimberly came to the funeral. We talked and she asked about my mother, about whether I knew who my father was. I could picture it. Kimberly at a funeral piecing together the puzzle. When did she tell you she knew me? That same day. After the funeral, she asked if we could meet for coffee. She explained everything, that she'd remembered you mentioning someone named Gina, that the dates made sense, that she'd confronted you and you'd had no idea I existed. Scarlett's eyes glistened. She told me she believed you, that you weren't the kind of man who'd walk away from his child. My throat constricted. I wouldn't have. If I'd known, I know. Kimberly said the same thing. Scarlett wiped her eyes. She started helping me the next month. $800 monthly. I tried to refuse, but she wouldn't hear it. She said I was family, even if no one else knew yet. She paid for my design courses, helped me buy this machine, covered the deposit on this shop. She never made me feel like a burden. She said I deserved to have a parent who cared. The weight of that settled over me. While I'd been living my quiet life, Kimberly had been building a bridge between me and this daughter I didn't know I had. I'm sorry, I said, my voice breaking. I should have known. I should have been there. You didn't know. Scarlett reached across the table, her hand resting lightly on mine. Kimberly said you were a good man who made one mistake 40 years ago. She said you'd spent your whole life being faithful and kind. One summer doesn't erase that. We sat in silence, her hand on mine, the shop quiet around us. Oh, Brianna is suing me, I said after a while. She wants to challenge the trust fund. She's claiming I manipulated Kimberly, that you don't deserve anything from the estate. Scarlett withdrew her hand, her expression tightening. I don't want the money, Mr. Fletcher. I never asked for it. When Kimberly's lawyer called after she passed and told me I was in the trust, I was shocked. I almost refused it. But you didn't. No, because he said it was what Kimberly wanted, and I couldn't disrespect her wishes. She looked at me steadily. But if the money causes you this much trouble, I'll walk away. I'll sign whatever papers say I don't want it. I just wanted a family. That's all I ever wanted. The simplicity of it hit me like a wave. All the legal maneuvering, all of Brianna's accusations, and Scarlett just wanted what should have been hers from the beginning. A father, a family, a sense of belonging. You're not walking away, I said. Kimberly left you that money because you're my daughter, because you deserve to be included. And I'm not going to let Brianna take that from you. Scarlett's eyes filled. You barely know me. I know you're mine. That's enough. I stood to leave. Scarlett walked me to the door. Before I left, she reached out and hugged me quick and uncertain, like she wasn't sure she had the right. I hugged her back, this stranger who was my daughter, and felt something crack open in my chest. As I drove home that evening, the sun setting behind the mountains, I realized I'd spent 41 years not knowing I had a daughter who only wanted to be loved. And now I had to fight another daughter in court to protect her. Monday morning, James Rodriguez spread a stack of printed emails across his desk, like a dealer laying out cards. Raymond, this is what Kimberly predicted, he said. And this is why Brianna will lose. I'd driven to his office straight from the community center, where I'd spent Sunday teaching woodworking and trying not to think about the past 3 days. The email sat between us now, 47 pages thick, with highlighted sections glowing yellow under the desk lamp. After Brianna filed the lawsuit, I immediately requested a subpoena for electronic communications between her and Craig Hutchinson. James explained. The court granted it Friday afternoon. These are from the past year emails mostly. They tell quite a story. He slid the first page toward me. February 14th, 2024. Valentine's Day. Almost exactly a year ago. The email was from Brianna to Craig. Subject line, opportunity. I read slowly, my hands steady, though my chest felt tight. Brianna had written, Craig, the trust fund is $1.65 million. If we challenge it together, we can split it 50-50. I'll divorce you on paper, but we stay partners. This is our retirement. Craig's response came 2 hours later. What about the girl, Scarlett? Brianna's reply was immediate. She's nobody. Dad manipulated Mom into including her while Mom was sick. We can prove undue influence. Preston says it's a strong case. I set the page down. Who's Preston? I'm Preston Kane, the lawyer Brianna hired. James tapped the next email. He appears in the correspondence starting in March. The second email was dated March 3rd, 2024. Craig had written, met with Preston Kane today. He specializes in trust disputes. Says we need to wait until 2 years after probate closes before filing. Statute of limitations is 3 years, so we have a window. Brianna responded within minutes. Perfect. That gives us time to build the case. Document everything. Find witnesses. Make Dad look like he controlled Mom. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. 2 years. They'd been planning this since a month after Kimberly passed. While I'd been sitting alone in the house mourning my wife, our daughter had been calculating how to take everything. Keep reading, James said quietly. The third email was dated April 15th, 2024. Brianna. I recorded Scarlett at the coffee shop last week. Asked her casual questions about Mom. She admitted Mom gave her money $800 a month for 3 years. That's our evidence that this woman insinuated herself into the family. Craig. Was it legal to record her without consent? Brianna, Colorado is a one-party consent state. Technically legal. But even if it wasn't, who cares? We'll edit it down to the useful parts. Preston says recordings are powerful in court. My jaw clenched. Scarlett had mentioned meeting Brianna once at a coffee shop last spring. She'd thought it was a coincidence. It hadn't been. They recorded her, I said. They ambushed her. When they're planning to use edited footage to make her look manipulative, James confirmed. But that's not the worst part. He pushed forward the fourth email. June 22nd, 2024. Subject line, done. Craig. Divorce finalized. Judge bought the irreconcilable differences story. We're officially separated. Now they can't claim we're conspiring. We're legally distinct parties with separate interests. Brianna, brilliant. When we win this, we split everything offshore. The Cayman's account you set up, Craig already active, 50-50 split like we agreed. I stared at the words. They'd divorced specifically to make their conspiracy look legitimate. They'd stood in front of a judge and lied dissolved a marriage on paper while planning to split stolen money in secret. That's fraud, I said. Yes, and it gets worse. The fifth email was dated October 10th, 2024. Brianna. Preston found two people willing to testify that Dad isolated Mom in her final years. Patricia Moreland and George Whitman. Both need money. I'm paying them $5,000 each for consulting fees. Craig, that's witness tampering. Brianna. It's called consulting fees. They're consultants consulting on Mom's final years. Completely legal. Preston drew up the paperwork. I pushed back from the desk. She paid people to lie. She did. Patricia Moreland is a retired schoolteacher. George Whitman is an engineer. Both facing financial difficulties. Both signed affidavits claiming they witnessed you controlling Kimberly, isolating her from friends, pressuring her to change the trust. James's voice was flat. Neither of them knew Kimberly. We've already verified that. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my thighs. They'll go to prison for perjury. If they testify, yes. But I don't think they will. When they understand the consequences, they'll recant. James slid the final email toward me. This one was sent February 1st, 6 days before Brianna filed the lawsuit. I made myself read it. Brianna. We file Friday. Preston says with the recording, the witnesses, and the financial documents showing Dad had control of the accounts, we'll get at least $2 million in settlement. Probably more. Dad won't fight. He's too broken since Mom died. He'll fold. Craig and Scarlett. Brianna, she'll disappear. No one will believe her over us. She's a nobody with no legal standing. Once we prove the trust was invalid, she gets nothing. We walk away clean. The room was silent, except for the heating system's hum. Outside the window, downtown, cedarwood moved through its Monday morning. Inside this office, I was learning that my daughter had spent a year building a machine designed to destroy an innocent woman and steal everything my wife had tried to protect. This is criminal conspiracy, James said. Witness tampering, fraud, perjury. Raymond, Brianna didn't just sue you. She committed multiple felonies. What happens now? Now we file a motion to dismiss based on fraud and conspiracy. We'll submit these emails as evidence. The court will see that Brianna and Craig colluded, that they manufactured evidence, that they paid witnesses to lie. The judge will throw out the case. James gathered the papers into a neat stack. No, and then the prosecutor will likely press charges against all of them, Brianna, Craig, Preston, Kane, and the witnesses. Brianna could go to prison. Yes. I stood my legs unsteady. Through the window, I could see the mountains in the distance. My wife was buried at the cemetery on the east side of town. My daughter Scarlett was probably at her shop right now, unaware that she'd been targeted for destruction. And my daughter Brianna was somewhere out there waiting for me to fold, expecting me to be too broken to fight. She'd miscalculated. As I left James' office, I realized my daughter hadn't just sued me. She'd built a calculated plan to destroy Scarlett and steal everything Kimberly had protected. And now I had the proof. Tuesday afternoon, James introduced me to Daniel Harper, a forensic accountant with 20 years of experience unraveling financial fraud. Harper's office occupied a corner suite in the Cedarwood Business Center, a modern glass building that felt cold compared to James's historic downtown space. Harper himself was 50, silver-haired, wearing wire-rimmed glasses that caught the afternoon light. He shook my hand with the firm grip of someone used to delivering bad news. "Mr. Fletcher," he said, "your daughter has a serious debt problem." James and I sat across from Harper's desk while he opened a thick folder labeled Fletcher Brianna, Financial Analysis. Inside were spreadsheets, bank statements, credit reports, loan documents. "So I've been reviewing Brianna's financial history for the past 72 hours, Harper began. "What I found explains why she's suing you. This isn't about fairness or inheritance rights. This is about survival." He slid across a credit report with red flags highlighted in yellow. "Your daughter currently owes $425,000 in various debts." Harper tapped the paper. $85,000 on credit cards alone, 5 different cards, all maxed out with interest rates between 18 and 24%. The minimum payments are $2,000 monthly, which she's been missing regularly. Her credit score has dropped to 540. I stared at the numbers. $85,000 on credit cards. Kimberly and I had taught Brianna to save, to spend within her means, to avoid debt. Apparently, she'd learned nothing. "Then there are the personal loans," Harper continued. $120,000 borrowed from 2 different banks over the past 3 years. She claimed the money was for home renovations and emergency medical expenses. But there's no record of any major medical bills, and she's been renting, not owning. The banks are now questioning the loan applications. "She lied to get the loans," James said. "It appears so. If the banks pursue it, she could face fraud charges." Harper moved to the next document. But the biggest debt is a business loan for $220,000 taken out in May 2022. She used it to start some kind of online retail company. The business lasted 8 months before folding. The loan is still outstanding, and the lender is threatening legal action. $425,000. My daughter owed nearly $500,000 to various creditors, and she'd hidden it all from me. "How did this happen?" I asked. Harper removed his glasses, cleaned them, put them back on. "Lifestyle inflation," he said. Between 2021 and 2023, Brianna spent approximately $148,000 on luxury goods and travel. Louis Vuitton purchases totaling $28,000. A BMW X5 bought in 2023 for $75,000. She still owes $62,000 on it. And multiple vacations, Hawaii, Paris, the Maldives. Those trips alone cost $45,000. I thought about my own truck, a 2015 Ford F-150 with 160,000 miles. I thought about Kimberly clipping coupons, buying store-brand groceries. We'd lived carefully our whole lives so we could leave something for Brianna. And she'd been burning through cash like it was infinite. "There's more," Harper said, his voice gentler. "I also looked at how much financial support Brianna received from you and Kimberly over the years." He slid across a spreadsheet with highlighted entries going back to 2015. Emergency loans totaling $45,000, none repaid. Business investments of $35,000 for ventures that never materialized. Medical expenses of $18,000, though I couldn't find corresponding hospital bills. Wedding expenses of $14,000 in 2019. All told, Brianna received $112,000 from you and your wife between 2015 and 2021. Most of it was never repaid. $112,000. When Brianna said she needed help, we helped. Now compare that to Scarlett Reed, Harper said, pulling out another sheet. According to Kimberly's records, Scarlett received $800 per month for 72 months. That's $57,600 total, less than half of what Brianna received. The irony hit me like a slap. Brianna was suing because she claimed Scarlett had unfairly benefited from Kimberly's generosity. But Brianna herself had taken twice as much money and was still drowning in debt. Raymond, your daughter is insolvent, Harper said flatly. She's one lawsuit away from declaring bankruptcy. The trust fund isn't a windfall for her, it's a lifeline. Without it, she loses everything: the car, the apartment, any semblance of financial stability. She needs this lawsuit to survive. James leaned forward. Daniel, can we use this analysis in court? Absolutely. It establishes clear motive. Brianna isn't suing because Raymond manipulated Kimberly. She's suing because she's desperate for money, and it demonstrates a pattern of financial irresponsibility and exploitation of parental generosity. Harper closed the folder. A jury will see this and understand exactly who the real manipulator is. I stood, needing to move, needing air. Through the window, I could see the parking lot below, rows of cars glinting in the winter sun. She's not suing for fairness, I said quietly. She's suing for survival. Yes, Harper agreed. And she's willing to destroy Scarlett Reed to get it. I turned back. Will this be enough to prove she's lying? Combined with the conspiracy emails James showed you yesterday? Yes. This paints a complete picture. Brianna needed money, so she invented a lawsuit. She's not a wronged daughter seeking justice. She's a debtor trying to avoid bankruptcy by any means necessary. James gathered the documents into his briefcase. We'll file these with our response to the lawsuit. The judge will see the financial motive, the conspiracy with Craig, the manufactured evidence. Brianna's case will collapse. As I drove home that evening, the sun setting behind the mountains, I finally understood something I'd been struggling with since I watched Kimberly's video. Why had my wife refused the $180,000 cancer treatment? She'd told me it was to preserve our savings, to give me financial security. But now I saw the deeper reason. Kimberly had known Brianna would come for every dollar we had. She'd seen our daughters spending the endless requests for money, the debt accumulating like a cancer of its own. If Kimberly had spent that $180,000 trying to extend her life by a few months, it would have been one more drain on resources, one more hole Brianna could point to and say, "See, they wasted money that should have been mine." Instead, Kimberly had built a fortress. She'd structured the trust to protect me and Scarlett. She'd gathered evidence of Brianna's conspiracy. She'd prepared for this exact battle, and now I had to defend it. Thursday morning, I sat across from my daughter for the first time in 16 months. Preston Kane's law office was smaller than James's, located on the second floor of a newer building, with glass walls and modern furniture that felt sterile. The conference room had a long table, uncomfortable chairs, and a window overlooking the parking lot. Everything was beige and gray. Brianna sat at one end, with Preston Kane beside her. She wore a navy suit that looked expensive, pearl earrings catching the light blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. Professional, polished, she looked like a successful businesswoman, not someone drowning in $400,000 of debt. She didn't look at me once. James sat to my left, a stack of documents in front of him. The court reporter positioned herself at the corner with her stenography machine. Preston Kane looked smug. The reporter swore Brianna in. She raised her right hand and promised to tell the truth. James began. "Ms. Fletcher, when did you last visit Kimberly before she passed away?" Brianna's posture stiffened. "I visited her regularly." "Can you define regularly?" "Once or twice a month." James slid across a document. These are visitor logs from the hospice facility. According to these records, you visited 3 times total in 6 months. The last visit was 6 weeks before she passed. Would you say 3 visits qualifies as regular? Brianna's face flushed. I was busy with work. I had responsibilities. Did your business responsibilities prevent you from visiting your dying mother more than 3 times in 6 months? My mother understood I had obligations. I wanted to shout that Kimberly had spent those final months asking where Brianna was, wondering if she'd done something wrong. But I sat still, hands flat on the table, and said nothing. James moved to the next document. Between 2015 and 2021, did your parents provide you with money? Some, not much. Bank records show that Raymond and Kimberly Fletcher gave you $112,000 during that period. Does that refresh your memory? Brianna stared at the spreadsheet. Her face went pale. That seems... I don't remember it being that much. Did you repay any of it? Silence. Ms. Fletcher, did you repay your parents any portion of the $112,000 they gave you? I intended to. But you didn't. Not yet. James made a note. Now I'd like to ask about Scarlett Reed. Did you become aware that your mother was giving money to Scarlett in October 2021? Yes. I saw bank transfers I didn't recognize. When I asked my mother about them, she told me she was helping some woman I'd never heard of. How did that conversation go? I was concerned. My mother was vulnerable, possibly being manipulated. James pulled out another document. During that confrontation in October 2021, did you say to your mother, "Then just let go already"? Brianna blinked. I don't remember saying that. For the record, we have an audio recording of that conversation. Would you like to hear it to refresh your memory? Brianna's face went white. Beside her, Preston Kane shifted uncomfortably. I may have said something like that. I was upset. You told your dying mother to just let go already because she was giving money to your half-sister. I meant she should let go of the stress. I watched my daughter lie. Her tells were the same as when she was a child, touching her earring, the slight elevation of her chin, the careful modulation of her voice. James pulled out the stack of emails. Did you and Craig Hutchinson exchange emails discussing a plan to contest your mother's trust fund? I don't recall specific emails. Let me read one to you. February 14th, 2024, 4 months before your divorce. You wrote, Craig, the trust fund is $1.65 million. If we challenge it together, we can split it 50-50. I'll divorce you on paper, but we stay partners. Do you recall writing that? Brianna didn't answer. Preston Kane's smugness had evaporated. Did you divorce Craig Hutchinson as part of a strategy to make your conspiracy look more legitimate? I didn't conspire with anyone. We have 47 emails between you and Craig discussing this lawsuit. Would you like me to read more of them? Brianna looked at Preston. He gave a small shake of his head. I'd like to invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. James made another note. Did you pay Patricia Moreland and George Whitman to provide testimony in this case? I paid them consulting fees. Hospital records show neither of them ever visited your mother. Phone records show no calls between them and Kimberly Fletcher. How exactly did they know your family? Brianna touched her earring again. They were acquaintances. You paid acquaintances $5,000 each to sign affidavits claiming your father isolated your mother. The payment was for their time. James closed his folder. I have no further questions. Preston Kane stood immediately gathering papers. Brianna remained seated for a moment, her face carefully blank. Then she stood, adjusted her suit jacket, and walked toward the door. She passed within 3 feet of me. I could smell her perfume, the same one Kimberly used to wear. Brianna, I said quietly. She didn't stop, didn't turn, Just kept walking out the door and down the hall, her heels clicking until the sound faded. James leaned close and whispered, "She just destroyed her own case." But I barely heard him. All I could think was, this is the daughter I raised. The girl who used to bring me dandelions, who cried when we read Charlotte's Web together, who made me Father's Day cards. And I didn't recognize her anymore. Friday afternoon, Valentine's Day, ironically, Craig Hutchinson walked into James's office and threw Brianna under the bus. I'd been sitting with James for 20 minutes going over yesterday's deposition transcript when his assistant said Craig was in the waiting room, alone, no lawyer, asking to speak with us. James and I exchanged a look. Then he nodded. "Send him in." Craig was 40, average height, brown hair thinning at the crown. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt, his face drawn with exhaustion. His hands shook as he closed the door. "Mr. Rodriguez, Mr. Fletcher." He nodded to each of us. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment." James gestured to the chair. "Sit down, Mr. Hutchinson. What can we do for you?" Craig sat, hands gripping his knees. "I want to cooperate. I'll testify against Brianna. I'll give you everything you need." The room went quiet. Craig Hutchinson had just offered to destroy his ex-wife's lawsuit. James leaned back, studying Craig carefully. "Why?" "Because I just found out she's been lying to me too." Craig's jaw tightened. "We had a deal. Split the trust fund 50-50 once we won. $825,000 each. Enough to start over, pay off debts, secure Emma's future." He looked at me directly. "I'm not proud of what we planned, Mr. Fletcher. But I thought we were in it together. Partners." "What changed?" James asked. "Yesterday after Brianna's deposition, she was rattled. Started talking about what we'd do if things went wrong. That's when she mentioned her debt." Craig rubbed his face. $425,000. Credit cards, business loans, personal loans. She never told me. The whole time we were planning this, she was drowning in debt and hiding it. I thought about Daniel Harper's analysis, the spreadsheets, the luxury purchases, all hidden from Craig, too. When I confronted her, Craig continued, she admitted she'd planned to use my share to pay off her creditors. She was going to give me $200,000 and keep the rest, $625,000, for herself. His voice cracked. "I risked my relationship with my daughter for this. I divorced my wife on paper to make the lawsuit look legitimate. I let her pay people to lie, and she was planning to betray me the whole time." James pulled a legal pad closer. "Mr. Hutchinson, if you're willing to cooperate, I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning." Craig took a breath. "Brianna came to me in February last year. Said her mother had died and left a trust fund worth $1.65 million. Said her father had manipulated her mother into including some stranger, Scarlett Reed, and cutting Brianna out of her fair share. She wanted to contest the trust, but she needed someone to back her up." "Why did you agree?" I asked. Craig met my eyes. "Because I was broke. My business had failed. I owed money. And Brianna made it sound so reasonable. She said you'd manipulated a sick woman, that Scarlett was taking advantage. She convinced me we'd be righting a wrong." He looked down. I wanted to believe her because I needed the money. James was taking notes. "What specific actions did Brianna take to build the case?" "She hired a private investigator, guy named Bradley Cole. Had him follow Scarlett Reed for 6 months, April through September last year. Photographs, surveillance tracking her movements. Brianna wanted evidence that Scarlett was living beyond her means, proving she was a gold digger. But Cole's report showed the opposite. Scarlett worked 60-hour weeks, lived in a small apartment, drove a 15-year-old Corolla. So Brianna buried the report." James made another note. "What else?" "In April, Brianna arranged to run into Scarlett at a coffee shop. Made it look casual. Asked questions about Kimberly, about their relationship. Got Scarlett talking about how Kimberly helped her financially, Brianna recorded the whole conversation on her phone. Colorado is a one-party consent state, James said. That recording would be legal, sure, but Brianna edited it. Cut out all the context, how Scarlett never asked for money, how Kimberly insisted on helping, how Scarlett tried to refuse. The edited version makes it sound like Scarlett manipulated Kimberly. Craig shook his head. When I heard the full recording versus what Brianna planned to use in court, I knew we were crossing a line. But I was already in too deep. Tell me about the witnesses, James said. Patricia Moreland and George Whitman. Brianna found them through Preston Kane's paralegal. People who needed money and weren't too concerned about ethics. She paid them $5,000 each to sign affidavits claiming they'd witnessed Raymond isolating Kimberly. Made them memorize stories about visits that never happened, conversations they never overheard. Brianna wrote the affidavits herself. They just signed. I felt sick. My daughter had paid strangers to lie about me in sworn documents. James set down his pen. If you testify to everything you just told me in court under oath, what do you expect in return? Leniency. I know I'm facing criminal charges, conspiracy fraud, maybe witness tampering. But if I cooperate fully, give you all the emails, the payment records, the original surveillance report, the unedited recording, everything, maybe the prosecutor will recommend reduced charges. Maybe I can avoid prison time for Emma's sake. I can speak with the prosecutor, James said. But I can't make promises. The extent of leniency will depend on how useful your testimony is. I'll do whatever it takes. Craig's voice was firm. I'll testify. I'll provide documentation. I'll plead guilty if necessary. I just need a chance to be there for my daughter. James glanced at me, a silent question. I nodded slightly. This man had conspired against me, had helped Brianna try to destroy Scarlett. But he was offering us the final piece we needed. All right, James said. We have a deal. I'll contact the prosecutor today. In the meantime, I need you to write down everything, dates, amounts, specific conversations. And Mr. Hutchinson, don't contact Brianna. The prosecutor will want to control when and how she finds out you've turned state's witness. Craig stood, relief visible despite the exhaustion. Thank you, both of you. As Craig turned to leave, I spoke. Does Brianna know you're here? He paused at the door. Not yet, but she will soon. After Craig left, James turned to me, and for the first time in a week, he smiled. We just won this case. With Craig's testimony, the emails, the evidence of manufactured witnesses, Brianna's lawsuit is dead. The judge will dismiss it, and the prosecutor will file criminal charges. He was right. We'd won. Scarlett would be protected. The trust fund would remain intact, but I felt no victory. My daughter's own partner had just betrayed her to save himself. The man she'd trusted, the father of her child, had walked into this office and provided every detail needed to destroy her. Through the window, I could see couples walking by carrying roses and chocolates. Valentine's Day. A day for love. We just turned it into a day of betrayal. Monday morning, James brought in the two people Brianna had paid to lie, Patricia Moreland and George Whitman. Both looked terrified. They sat across from us in James's conference room. Patricia Moreland was 52, a retired elementary school teacher with graying hair. George Whitman was 60, an engineer with wire-rimmed glasses and fidgeting hands. Neither would meet my eyes. James had called them over the weekend after Craig's confession. He'd explained we knew about the payments and suggested they come voluntarily. James opened a folder containing the affidavits they'd signed. Mr. Whitman, Ms. Moreland, you both provided sworn statements claiming Raymond Fletcher isolated his wife Kimberly during her final illness. Is that true? Patricia began crying before she answered. No. I never met Kimberly Fletcher. Brianna paid me $5,000 to sign the affidavit. She wrote every word. I just signed my name. George cleared his throat. Same here. My wife has MS. The medical bills were crushing us. When Brianna offered $5,000 for signing a document, I took it. I told myself it was consulting work. He looked at me finally. "I'm sorry, Mr. Fletcher. I needed the money and I believed what Brianna told me about you." "What did she tell you?" James asked. George hesitated. "That you were controlling. That you'd manipulated your sick wife. That signing the affidavit would help protect your daughter from losing her inheritance." James slid Patricia's affidavit across the table. "Ms. Moreland, according to this document, you visited Kimberly Fletcher at her home in May 2022. You claim Raymond was present during the visit and prevented Kimberly from speaking freely. You state that Kimberly appeared frightened and isolated. Is any of that true?" Patricia wiped her eyes. "None of it. I've never been to the Fletcher house. I didn't know Kimberly existed until Brianna contacted me last September. She came to my apartment with a typed document and said she needed someone to confirm her mother had been isolated. She offered $5,000. My retirement isn't enough to live on. I'm working part-time at Target just to pay rent. How did Brianna know to contact you?" "I don't know. She said a mutual friend recommended me." Patricia's voice shook. "She gave me a script to memorize. Told me what to say if anyone questioned me. Made it sound simple: sign the paper, testify if needed, collect the money." James turned to George. "Mr. Whitman, your affidavit claims you witnessed Raymond pressuring Kimberly to modify her will in September 2022. You state you were visiting the Fletcher home to discuss a woodworking project when you overheard this conversation. True?" "No. I've only met Mr. Fletcher once at Anderson's hardware store on Main Street. We talked about table saws for maybe 5 minutes. I never visited his home. Never met his wife." George removed his glasses, cleaned them. "Brianna approached me at the hardware store in October. Said I seemed honest. She spun a story about her father taking advantage of her sick mother. Showed me bank statements with transfers to someone named Scarlett. Made it sound like conspiracy." "Did she pay you in cash?" "Yes. 5,000 in hundreds. Met me behind the post office. Handed me an envelope. I signed the affidavit in my truck." He looked at his hands. I told myself it wasn't lying because I believed her. "Are you both willing to recant these affidavits in court?" James asked. "To testify under oath that everything you signed was false." Patricia nodded immediately. "Yes. I can't live with this lie anymore. Since I signed it, I haven't slept. Every time I close my eyes, I see that woman's name, Kimberly, and know I helped attack her memory." "I'll testify too," George said. "I'll tell the judge exactly what happened. How Brianna approached me, what she paid me, how she coached me on what to say." James leaned forward. "You both understand you've committed perjury. That's a felony. You could face jail time and fines." Patricia's face crumpled. "I know. I'll accept whatever consequences come. I just want to make this right." "If you cooperate fully," James said, "I'll speak to the prosecutor. Recommend leniency given your voluntary disclosure." James pulled out fresh affidavit forms. Patricia and George signed new statements admitting they'd lied, explaining Brianna's payment. The court reporter documented everything. Patricia looked at me. "Mr. Fletcher, why did I agree?" I'd been silent through this meeting, but she deserved an answer. "Brianna told me you were abusive," Patricia said quietly. "She showed me photographs of your wife, Kimberly, looked so thin, so sick. Brianna said you'd caused that. Stressed her to death, isolated her from everyone. She said signing would protect Brianna's inheritance from a man who'd hurt her mother." Tears ran down her face. "I believed her. I thought I was helping. My wife died of cancer," I said. "Stage 4 lung cancer. She refused aggressive treatment to spend her final months at home with me." Patricia went pale. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," George spoke up. "Brianna was convincing. She had documents, photos, this whole narrative. She made you sound like a monster. We should have verified, should have questioned, but the money, he trailed off. There's no excuse. No, I agreed. There isn't. Patricia stood unsteady. I'll do whatever the court requires. Testify, accept punishment. After they left, I sat alone in James's office. He'd gone to make copies of the new affidavits, leaving me with the afternoon light slanting through the window and the weight of what I'd just heard. 2 strangers had been willing to destroy my life for $5,000 each. They'd signed documents accusing me of abuse, of manipulation, of driving my wife to an early grave. They'd memorized scripts Brianna had written, prepared to stand in a courtroom and lie under oath about events that never happened. And my daughter had orchestrated it all. She'd found their weaknesses, Patricia's poverty, George's medical debt, and exploited them. She'd crafted a narrative where I was the villain and she was the victim. She'd built a case on lies, paid witnesses, and manufactured evidence. $10,000. That's what it cost Brianna to try destroying me. Wednesday evening, Brianna called me for the first time in 16 months. Her voice was cold, clipped. Dad, we need to talk. Meet me at the Mountain Bean at 4:30. She hung up before I could answer. The Mountain Bean was a coffee shop on Main Street. I arrived at 4:25 and spotted Brianna immediately. She sat at a corner table watching the door. She looked different than at the deposition. No navy suit, no pearl earrings. Just a black sweater hanging loose on her frame jeans, her blonde hair in a messy ponytail. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. I sat down across from her, didn't order coffee, didn't say hello, just waited. I know Craig talked to your lawyer, she said. No preamble. Whatever he told you, he's lying. He told the truth, Brianna. You don't know that. We have the emails, all 47 of them. Every plan you made, every lie you told, every dollar you paid to fake witnesses. We have recordings, bank transfers, affidavits. We have everything. Her face went pale. Those emails were taken out of context. Stop, my voice came out hard. I've spent 2 weeks watching you lie. I'm done listening to lies. Brianna's hands tightened around her coffee cup. You don't understand. Watching Mom give money to some stranger. Watching her replace me. Scarlett is your sister. She's not my sister. Brianna's voice rose sharply. People glanced over. She lowered her tone, but the anger remained. She's a stranger who manipulated Mom. Scarlett never asked for anything. Your mother reached out to her. Your mother chose to help. Mom gave her $57,000 and then left her 15% of the trust. That should be mine. More people were looking now. The barista paused mid-pour. Sit down, Brianna, I said quietly. She was half out of her chair, leaning forward, face flushed. For a moment, I thought she'd storm out. Then she sat slowly, hands trembling. I leaned forward. Your mother gave you $112,000 over 6 years. She gave Scarlett $57,000. You received double what Scarlett got, and you're still not satisfied. That was different. I'm her daughter. So is Scarlett. Brianna's eyes filled with tears. Why did you do this to us? Why did you cheat on Mom? I didn't cheat on your mother. What happened with Gina was 42 years ago, before I even met Kimberly. But you lied. You never told us about her. One I didn't know. I heard the desperation in my voice. I swear, Brianna, I didn't know Scarlett existed until 2 weeks ago. Gina never told me she was pregnant. Drop Scarlett from the trust. Give me her 15%. I'll drop the lawsuit. We can settle this right now. I looked at my daughter. At the desperation in her face, the calculation beneath the tears. No, Brianna blinked. What? Your mother wanted Scarlett protected. She set up that trust knowing exactly what she was doing. I'm not going to betray her wishes. She was sick. She wasn't thinking clearly. She was thinking more clearly than either of us. I stood up. Your mother knew you'd do this. She knew you'd sue, she knew you'd lie, she knew you'd try to destroy Scarlett. That's why she prepared the USB. She was protecting both of us, me and Scarlett, from you. Brianna stood too, face twisted with anger and hurt. She pulled out a $10 bill and threw it on the table. Then I'll see you in court, and I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. A liar, a cheat, someone who abandoned his own daughter for 40 years, and then let his wife replace his real family with a stranger. She turned and walked toward the door. Every eye in the coffee shop was on her. On us. She pushed through the door and it swung shut with a sharp crack. I stood there for a long moment. The barista approached hesitantly. Sir, are you okay? No, I said honestly. But I will be. I left the money on the table and walked out into the February cold. The sun had set, leaving the street washed in blue light. Somewhere in this town, Brianna was driving home, probably crying, probably already calling Preston Kane. Somewhere else, Scarlett was closing up her shop, unaware of what had just happened. And I was standing on Main Street, wondering if I'd just destroyed the last chance to salvage any relationship with my daughter. That night, I drove to the cemetery where Kimberly was buried. I parked under the old oak tree and walked to her grave. The headstone was simple. Kimberly Ann Fletcher, 1965 to 2023. Beloved wife, mother, teacher. Below that, love never fails. I stood there in the cold darkness, hands in my coat pockets, breath forming white clouds. Champion, I whispered, did I make the right choice, or am I losing both our daughters? The wind moved through bare branches. But from Kimberly, there was only silence. I stayed there for 20 minutes, talking to a headstone in the dark, asking questions with no answers. Finally, the cold drove me back to my truck. I sat with the engine running, heat slowly filling the space, and stared at the cemetery through the windshield. Tomorrow I'd wake up and face another day of this legal battle. Tomorrow I'd strategize with James, prepare for trial, build the case that would destroy my daughter's lawsuit and possibly send her to prison. But tonight, I was just a man who'd lost his wife and was watching his family disintegrate in ways Kimberly had predicted, but I still couldn't fully comprehend. I drove home through empty streets, the radio off. The house was dark when I arrived. I didn't turn on the lights, just walked through familiar rooms in the dark and finally collapsed on the couch. I didn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle and wondered what came next. The night before the trial, I sat in the kitchen where Kimberly and I had shared 40 years of dinners. The house felt emptier than ever. It was 8 in the evening. I'd made coffee even though I knew I wouldn't sleep, just needing something to do with my hands. The kitchen looked exactly as it had when Kimberly was alive. The wooden table she'd picked out in 1995 refinished twice. The refrigerator covered with photographs held up by magnets from places we'd visited: Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, the coast. One photo showed the three of us in 2018. Me, Kimberly, and Brianna at Brianna's birthday dinner. We were all smiling. We looked like a family that had everything figured out. Another photo from 2019 showed Brianna's wedding. Kimberly in a blue dress standing next to her daughter in white, both radiant. Craig was in that photo too before he became a co-conspirator. I was still staring at the photos when the doorbell rang. Scarlett stood on the porch holding a paper grocery bag. She wore jeans and a sweater, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders. "Hi," she said quietly. "I brought dinner. I didn't think you should be alone tonight." I stepped aside to let her in. She moved past me into the kitchen, setting the bag on the counter and unpacking containers. Chicken soup, homemade bread, a small container of butter. "My grandmother Dorothy used to make this soup," she said. "She taught me the recipe when I was 12. Said every family needed one good soup recipe for hard times." We ate at the kitchen table in near silence. The soup was good, rich broth, tender chicken vegetables cut precisely. The kind of meal someone makes when they're trying to offer comfort without words. "You don't have to do this," Scarlett said, finally setting down her spoon. "Go to trial tomorrow. Put yourself through this. I can walk away from the trust fund. Sign whatever papers say I don't want it. Let Brianna have what she thinks she's owed. Your mother didn't want you to walk away. She wanted you to have a family, to be included, to have what should have been yours from the beginning." "But what if we lose?" Scarlett's voice was small. "What if Brianna wins? What if the judge believes her story instead of ours? Then we lose together, but we won't stop fighting." I reached across the table, my hand covering hers. "Scarlett, your mother Kimberly spent her last months building a case to protect you. She gathered evidence, made videos, predicted exactly what Brianna would do. She knew this day was coming, and she trusted that I'd see it through." Scarlett's eyes were wet. "What was she like, Kimberly?" I thought about that for a long moment. "She was stubborn. Once she made up her mind about something, there was no changing it. But she was also kind. She saw the best in people even when they didn't deserve it. She believed in second chances, in forgiveness, in family no matter how complicated or broken. She saw the best in me when no one else did," Scarlett said softly. "She saw the best in all of us. That was her gift." I started gathering the dishes. Even Brianna. She never stopped hoping Brianna would change. We washed dishes together, falling into an easy rhythm. Scarlett washed, I dried, like we'd done this 100 times before, instead of just now on this night in this kitchen that had seen 40 years of family dinners and was only now learning what family could mean. When the last dish was put away, Scarlett dried her hands and moved toward the door. She paused, one hand on the doorknob, and turned back. "Thank you for not giving up on me. I know this would be easier if you just let Brianna win. Thank you for giving me a second chance to be a father," I said. "I missed 41 years with you. I don't want to miss any more." She hugged me then, quick and tight, and then she was gone, her car pulling out of the driveway and disappearing down Maple Ridge Drive. I locked the door and stood in the quiet house. Upstairs, I opened the drawer in my nightstand and pulled out Kimberly's wedding ring. She'd taken it off during her final hospital stay. Her fingers had grown too thin to hold it and asked me to keep it safe. White gold, simple band with an inscription inside, "Forever K." I held it in my palm, feeling its weight. 40 years of marriage, 40 years of promises kept, and now I was keeping one final promise to protect the family she'd built, even the parts I never knew existed. I opened my laptop and found the USB drive. I'd watched Kimberly's video a dozen times since that first night, but tonight I needed to see her face again, needed to hear her voice telling me this was right. The video played. Kimberly sitting in our bedroom, thin and pale but determined. Her words washed over me. "Protect Scarlett. The evidence is all here. Brianna has been planning this. I love you. Forgive me for carrying this burden alone." At the end of the video, she looked directly into the camera. "Raymond, whatever happens, remember family is worth fighting for, even when it breaks your heart." I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. Then I got into bed, still holding Kimberly's ring, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow the truth would come out. Tomorrow a judge would see the emails, the manufactured witnesses, the conspiracy that Brianna and Craig had built. Tomorrow, Kimberly's careful preparation would either save us or fail us. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the 40 years I'd had with Kimberly and the 41 years I'd missed with Scarlett. Tomorrow in a courtroom, the USB would be played. Kimberly's voice would be heard. Brianna's secrets would be exposed. And I had no idea if I was ready. Tomorrow the USB will be played in court. Kimberly's voice will be heard. Brianna's secrets will be exposed. But before we get there, Have you ever had to face someone you love in a moment like this? Tell me in the comments, and please subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. A quick note, the story ahead includes fictionalized elements for storytelling purposes. If that's not for you, feel free to stop here. I woke at 5:30, exhausted, but unable to stay in bed. The house was silent. Scarlett had offered to come with me, but I'd told her no. This was something I had to face alone. I showered, dressed in my charcoal gray suit and burgundy tie, and stood in front of the mirror. My hands shook as I adjusted the knot. 42 years of mistakes. 16 months of grief. 18 days since I'd learned my daughter wanted to destroy me. It all came down to today, Monday, March the 24th, 2025. The Larimer County Courthouse stood before me like a monument of judgment. Inside, my family's secrets would be laid bare. I adjusted my charcoal gray suit and burgundy tie in the restroom mirror. My hands trembled. 42 years of mistakes. 16 months of grief. 18 days since I'd learned my daughter wanted to destroy me. It all came down to today. James Rodriguez met me in the hallway, his leather briefcase worn but professional. Scarlett stood beside him in a simple gray dress, her auburn hair pulled back, hands clasped tight. She looked up at me with nervous eyes, my daughter, the one I'd never known. "Ready?" James asked. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. Inside courtroom 4, B. Judge Barbara Stone, 60 years old, with short silver hair and steel-rimmed glasses, presided from the bench. On one side sat Preston Kane and Brianna. My daughter wore a black suit, her face cold and unreadable. She didn't look at me once. On the other side, Craig Hutchinson sat alone. He'd already made his deal. Judge Stone called the session to order at 9 o'clock sharp. Preston Kane rose first. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Your Honor, this case is about manipulation. Raymond Fletcher hid a secret child for 40 years. When his wife discovered this betrayal, he coerced her into creating a trust fund that unfairly benefits a stranger, Scarlett Reed, at the expense of his legitimate daughter, Brianna." James stood to respond. His tone was calm but firm. "Your Honor, this case is about greed. Kimberly Fletcher made her own choices. She created the trust fund willingly to protect all her children, including Scarlett. Brianna Fletcher orchestrated a 2-year conspiracy with her ex-husband to contest that trust, fabricate evidence, and destroy her father's reputation. The evidence will show the truth." Judge Stone looked at both lawyers, then at me. "Proceed." The first witness was Patricia Moreland, a retired elementary school teacher, one of the 2 people Brianna had paid to lie. James questioned her gently. "Ms. Moreland, did you sign an affidavit claiming Raymond Fletcher isolated his wife Kimberly?" Patricia nodded, voice shaking. "Yes." "Was that statement true?" A long pause. "No. I never met Mrs. Fletcher." "Why did you sign it?" Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "Brianna Fletcher paid me $5,000. She told me her father was abusive. I thought I was helping." George Whitman followed with the same testimony. 2 fake witnesses, $10,000, all orchestrated by Brianna. After the morning break, Craig Hutchinson took the stand. He didn't look at Brianna. His voice was flat, detached. "Brianna and I began planning the lawsuit in February 2024. We were still married then. She said if we worked together, we could split the trust fund 50-50. James asked, "What changed?" Craig's jaw tightened. "I discovered she owed $425,000 in debt. She planned to use my share to pay it off. I was going to get nothing. The emails were entered into evidence. 47 messages between Brianna and Craig. Plans to fabricate witnesses. Discussions of offshore accounts. Brianna's words, 'Dad is weak. He won't fight.'" Judge Stone's expression hardened. Daniel Harper, the forensic accountant, testified next. His analysis was devastating. Brianna Fletcher received $112,000 in financial support from her parents between 2015 and 2021. In contrast, Scarlett Reed received $57,000 over 3 years. Despite receiving double the support, Ms. Fletcher accumulated $425,000 in debt through extravagant spending. James asked, "In your professional opinion, what was Ms. Fletcher's motive for this lawsuit?" "Survival. She needed the trust fund to avoid bankruptcy." Brianna stared at the table. She didn't deny it. After lunch, the courtroom fell silent. James approached the bench with a USB drive. "Your Honor, before her passing in October 2023, Kimberly Fletcher recorded a video testimony. She anticipated this lawsuit. She left instructions for this evidence to be presented only if her daughter filed suit." Judge Stone admitted the video. The screen flickered to life, and there she was. Kimberly, my wife, alive again if only for 12 minutes. She wore a pale blue cardigan. Her face was thin cheeks, hollow from illness, but her eyes were clear. She looked directly into the camera, directly at me. "Raymond, if you're watching this, Brianna has sued you. I'm so sorry." My throat tightened. Kimberly explained everything. How she'd discovered Scarlett in 2021. How she'd reached out, offered support. How Brianna had confronted her in October 2021, demanding she cut Scarlett off. How Kimberly had refused. Then came the medical details. Stage 2 lung cancer in December 2021. Successful treatment. Stage 3B recurrence in October 2022. The doctor's recommendation: aggressive chemotherapy costing $180,000. But insurance only covered standard treatment, Kimberly said on screen. The advanced option would have destroyed our savings. I chose quality time with Raymond over suffering. She paused, voice breaking. Raymond didn't know about Scarlett until after I confronted him. He is innocent. Brianna has been planning this lawsuit since I got sick. The evidence is all here. The video ended. The courtroom was silent. James played the audio next. Brianna's voice sharp and angry. "Why didn't you do chemo? You wasted all that money." Kimberly weak but steady. "I chose quality time with your father over suffering. You should have fought. Now there's nothing left for me." "Brianna, I'm dying. Please don't do this." "Then just let go already. Stop dragging this out." Brianna's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't move. Judge Stone removed her glasses. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I've heard enough. The plaintiff's case is dismissed. The trust fund will remain as written. Raymond Fletcher, $990,000. Brianna Fletcher reduced to 5% under the no contest clause, $82,500. Scarlett Reed, $247,500. She continued. Brianna Fletcher and Craig Hutchinson will pay penalties for fraud and conspiracy. Brianna, $65,000. Craig, $45,000. Preston Kane, $15,000 for failure to verify evidence. Legal fees of $78,000 will be paid by the plaintiffs. Judge Stone looked at Brianna. Your mother loved you. She tried to protect you even from yourself. You repaid her with betrayal. This court is adjourned. Brianna stood sobbing and ran from the courtroom. Preston Kane followed. Scarlett whispered beside me, "It's over." I shook my head. "It's just beginning." Outside, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted questions. I heard my name, Brianna's name, Kimberly's name, but I didn't hear victory. I heard the truth. I won the case, but I lost my daughter. Tuesday morning, James called me to finalize the legal aftermath. The courtroom battle was over, but the emotional one had just begun. I arrived at his office at 10 o'clock. Scarlett was already there, seated in one of the leather chairs by the window. She looked tired. So did I. James spread a stack of documents across his desk. Let's go through this step by step, he said. You need to understand what yesterday's ruling means. I nodded. My hands felt cold. James began with the trust fund distribution. Raymond, you receive 60% of the $1.65 million trust. That's $990,000. Scarlett receives 15%, $247,500. Brianna's share was reduced to 5% under the no contest clause. She gets $82,500. He paused, letting the numbers settle. Brianna lost $330,000 by contesting the trust. That's the difference between what she would have received 25% and what she'll actually get now. Scarlett's voice was quiet. She lost everything she fought for. Yes, James said. And that's not all. He turned the page. Brianna owes $65,000 in court costs and penalties. Craig Hutchinson owes $45,000, reduced from $80,000 because he cooperated. Preston Kane owes $15,000 for professional misconduct. Together, Brianna and Craig must pay $78,000 to cover your legal fees, Raymond. I stared at the paper. The numbers felt unreal. Total takita, I asked. Brianna will pay $143,000 in fines and fees. Plus, she loses $330,000 from the trust. That's nearly $500,000. James folded his hands. Raymond, you won completely. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. What about criminal charges? I asked. James's expression darkened. Brianna faces witness tampering and conspiracy to commit fraud. Craig faces conspiracy charges, but his cooperation will likely reduce the penalty. Both could face probation and community service. Prison is unlikely. These are white-collar offenses, and neither has a prior record. And Craig's daughter? Scarlett asked. Emma, James nodded. Craig has been granted temporary supervised custody of Emma pending a family court review in 6 months. His criminal record will be considered, but since he cooperated and the charges are non-violent, the court will likely allow him to retain custody under supervision. I thought of the 8-year-old girl I'd never met. Another child caught in this mess. What about Patricia Moreland and George Whitman? I asked. Perjury charges. Both will likely receive 2 years probation and $5,000 fines. Because they recanted and cooperated, the court was lenient. James closed the folder. The money will be transferred to your accounts within 30 days. After that, it's over. Scarlett looked down at her hands. I don't want the money. James raised an eyebrow. Scarlett, I mean it. Can I give it back? No, James said gently. Kimberly wanted you to have it. It's not negotiable. Scarlett's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. I turned to James. Can I contact Brianna? He hesitated. Legally, yes. But I wouldn't recommend it right now. She's angry, humiliated, and facing financial ruin. Give her time. I'm not asking for permission, I said quietly. James studied me for a moment, then nodded. Be careful, Raymond. I drove home alone. The house felt empty. I sat in the living room and stared at the family photo on the mantel taken in 2018, back when things were simpler. Brianna was smiling. Kimberly's arm was around her. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Dad. Her voice was small, broken. I hadn't heard her call me that in 16 months. I didn't say anything. Dad, I'm sorry. Brianna was crying. I'm so sorry. I closed my eyes. Are you sorry for what you did or sorry that you lost? A long silence. Then, I don't know anymore. Your mother loved you, Brianna, even when you didn't deserve it. I know, her voice cracked. I know. I love you too, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. But I can't forgive you yet. Will you ever? I thought about Kimberly, about Scarlett, about the 16 months of silence. I don't know, I said. Ask me in a year. I hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand. My chest ached. My throat was tight. Had I done the right thing? Or had I just pushed her further away? I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore. That night I drove back to the cemetery. The air was cold. The grass was damp under my knees as I knelt beside Kimberly's grave. The headstone was simple, pale granite with her name and dates. Kimberly Ann Fletcher, 1965 to 2023. Beloved wife, mother, teacher. Love never fails. I touched the stone, tracing her name with my fingers. Kim, I whispered. I don't know if I'm doing this right. The wind moved through the trees, soft and low. I told her I loved her. But I also told her I can't forgive her yet. Was that the right thing? Or am I being weak? Am I holding on to anger because it's easier than letting go? I pressed my forehead against the cold stone. You forgave me 40 years ago for something I didn't even know I'd done. You forgave Brianna for things she said to you when you were dying. How did you do it? How did you love people who hurt you? The cemetery was silent. She called me Dad today, for the first time in over a year, and I told her to wait. To ask me again in 12 months. What if that's too long? What if she never calls again? I closed my eyes. Tell me I made the right choice. Tell me forgiveness takes time. Tell me I'm not failing you. But the wind offered no answer. Only the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of traffic on the highway. I stayed there for an hour, kneeling in the dark, whispering questions to a woman who couldn't answer. When I finally stood, my knees ached and my face was wet with tears. I drove home in silence, wondering if forgiveness was the right path, or if I was simply too broken to walk it yet. Spring came slowly to Cedarwood. 2 months after the trial, I found myself learning how to be a father again, this time to a daughter I'd never known. In early April, Scarlett received her portion of the trust fund. $247,500. I half expected her to leave town, start fresh somewhere far from the mess we'd all made. She didn't. Instead, she expanded her tailor shop with $80,000, paid off the mortgage on her late grandmother Dorothy's house with $45,000, and set up a $50,000 scholarship fund for design students at the community college. The rest, $72,500, she put into savings. No sports cars, no vacations, no Louis Vuitton bags, just quiet, careful choices. She was nothing like Brianna. The first Saturday in April, Scarlett knocked on my door at 2 in the afternoon. I have a question, she said. I invited her in. She looked around the living room, her eyes lingering on the family photos. Could you teach me how to fix furniture? She asked. I have some old chairs at the shop. They're beautiful, but the joints are loose. I don't want to throw them away. I blinked. You want me to teach you woodworking? She nodded. If you have time. I did. That became our routine. Every Saturday afternoon, Scarlett came to my workshop behind the house. I taught her how to sand, glue, clamp, and finish. She was patient, careful, and asked good questions. We didn't talk much at first. Just the sound of sandpaper on wood, the hum of the bandsaw, the clink of tools. But slowly we started filling the silence. She told me about her mother Gina, how Gina had loved music and used to sing while cooking, how she'd passed away in a car accident on I-25 when Scarlett was 18, how her grandmother Dorothy had raised her after that, teaching her to sew and never letting her feel unwanted. I told her about Kimberly, how we'd met at a hardware store in 1990 when she was looking for paint samples, how she'd laughed at my joke about primer, how we'd been married 3 months later. Scarlett smiled. That sounds like her. She was always decisive. She was, I said quietly. On Wednesdays we had dinner. I cooked soup, tomato, chicken, noodle, potato, leek. Scarlett brought fresh bread from the bakery downtown. We ate at the kitchen table, the same one Kimberly and I had bought in 1995. At first, Scarlett called me Mr. Fletcher. By mid-April, it was Raymond. And then one afternoon in late May, it changed. We were fixing a rocking chair in the workshop. The seat needed recaning, but the frame was solid oak worth saving. Scarlett was holding the back rail steady, while I fitted a new support slat. She shifted her grip and asked, "Dad, can you hand me the screwdriver?" The word hung in the air. I froze. My hands stopped moving. She looked up, eyes wide, realizing what she'd said. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "No," my voice cracked. "No, it's okay." I reached for the screwdriver and handed it to her. My vision blurred. I turned away, pretending to search for sandpaper, but my throat was too tight to speak. She didn't say anything else, just took the screwdriver and went back to work. But when I looked at her a moment later, she was smiling. In late May, Scarlett invited me to the reopening of her shop. She'd spent 2 months renovating. The space was twice as large now, with new sewing machines, bolts of fabric arranged by color, and a bright display window facing Old Market Street. The sign above the door read, "Scarlett's Alterations and Custom Designs. Established 2019. Inside the walls were painted soft cream. There were framed photos near the counter, 3 of them. One was her grandmother Dorothy, standing in a garden smiling. One was her mother Gina Young, and laughing holding baby Scarlett. And one was Kimberly. It was a candid shot, probably taken at a school event. Kimberly was wearing a blue cardigan, her hair pulled back, smiling gently at the camera. Scarlett stood beside me looking at the photos. "I didn't know what else to do," she said quietly. "Dorothy raised me. Gina gave me life, but Kimberly gave me a family." She touched the frame holding Kimberly's picture. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me a family." I didn't trust myself to speak. I just nodded. Customers began arriving. Friends, neighbors, people from the community college. They admired the shop, congratulated Scarlett, ordered custom alterations. I stayed in the background watching. She moved through the room with ease, confident and warm. She greeted everyone by name. She laughed. She listened. And I realized, standing there in the corner, that she was so much like Kimberly. Patient, kind, strong in ways that didn't need to be loud. How had I missed 41 years with her? Later that evening, after the guests had left, Scarlett and I sat on the porch of my house. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. We didn't say much, just sat there listening to the crickets, watching the light fade. Finally, Scarlett spoke. "Do you ever hear from Brianna?" I looked at the horizon. The last sliver of sun disappeared behind the ridge. "Not yet," I said. "But I'm waiting." She nodded. "Do you think she'll call?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But if she does, I'll answer." Scarlett leaned back in her chair. "You're a good man, Dad." The words still caught me off guard. But this time I didn't look away. "I'm trying," I said. We sat there until the stars came out, father and daughter learning how to be a family. Maybe second chances were what families were made of. Summer turned the town golden, but for Brianna, the days were dark. 4 months after the trial, she began the long road to redemption or ruin. I didn't see her, not yet. But I heard about her progress from Dr. Helen Morrison, the court-appointed mediator, and from Margaret Sullivan at the hospice center. This is what I learned. In July, Brianna moved into a studio apartment on the east side of town. She'd sold her BMW, her Louis Vuitton bags, her jewelry. Everything went to pay down the debt. She owed $568,000. The trust fund had given her $82,500. After paying the $143,000 in court penalties, she was left with nothing and still owed $485,500. She took a part-time job at a flower shop downtown. 20 hours a week, $12 an hour, $2,400 a month before taxes. It would take her decades to pay off what she owed. But Judge Stone had given her conditions. 5 of them. If she violated any, she'd serve 6 months in jail. Condition 1: weekly therapy with Dr. Rebecca Foster, a family psychologist. Condition 2: 400 hours of community service at Cedarwood Hospice Center, supervised by Margaret Sullivan. Condition 3: Financial supervision. Every purchase over $500 had to be reported. Condition 4, monthly mediation sessions with Scarlett. Condition 5, no contact with Craig Hutchinson. Brianna had no choice. She agreed to all of it. Dr. Rebecca Foster told me later that Brianna's first therapy session lasted 50 minutes, and she cried for 45 of them. She didn't speak, just sat in the chair, face buried in her hands, sobbing. Dr. Foster let her. In the second session, Brianna finally spoke. "I don't know who I am anymore," she said. Dr. Foster leaned forward. "Then let's start by figuring out who you want to be." It was a beginning. In August, Brianna began her community service at the hospice center. Margaret Sullivan, the supervising nurse, was 55 and no nonsense. She'd worked in palliative care for 30 years and had seen every kind of grief. She assigned Brianna the hardest jobs: cleaning patient rooms, serving meals, reading to those too weak to hold a book. "This is where your mother wanted to be at the end," Margaret told her on the first day. "Maybe you'll understand her here." Brianna said nothing. She just nodded and put on the volunteer smock. One of the patients was Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, 78 years old, stage 4 lung cancer. She had no family left. Just a small room with a window overlooking the garden. Brianna brought her lunch one afternoon, soup and crackers, and helped her sit up. Mrs. Hayes looked at her with sharp, knowing eyes. "Why are you here, dear?" she asked. Brianna hesitated. "I'm paying for my mistakes." Mrs. Hayes smiled faintly. "Then make sure you learn from them." Brianna visited her every day after that. In September, Brianna started writing letters. Not to me, not to Scarlett, to Kimberly. She kept them in a notebook Dr. Foster had given her. Handwritten, private. Dr. Foster told me about one of them later with Brianna's permission. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't understand what you were protecting until it was too late. I thought Scarlett stole you from me, but I was the one who pushed everyone away. I don't know if I can fix this, but I'm trying." I didn't cry when I heard that, but I came close. The first mediation session between Brianna and Scarlett took place in mid-September. Dr. Helen Morrison facilitated. The session was held in a neutral office, downtown, white walls, soft chairs, a box of tissues on the table. Brianna and Scarlett sat across from each other. For 10 minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Brianna's voice broke the silence. It was quiet, shaking. "I'm sorry for what I did to you." Scarlett didn't respond right away. She looked down at her hands. "Why did you hate me so much?" she asked. Brianna's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't hate you. I hated that Mom loved you more than me." Scarlett looked up. "She didn't love me more. She just loved us differently." Brianna nodded slowly. "I know that now. They didn't hug. They didn't shake hands." But when the session ended, something had shifted. The anger was gone. What remained was grief and the faint possibility of healing. I didn't attend the mediation. Dr. Morrison thought it was too soon, but I called her afterward. "How is she?" I asked. Dr. Morrison paused. "She's trying Raymond. It's slow, but it's real." I sat in my living room that night staring at the family photo from 2018. Brianna smiling. Kimberly's arm around her. Was I ready to forgive her? I didn't know. Kimberly had believed in second chances. She'd forgiven me 40 years ago for something I didn't even know I'd done. She'd forgiven Brianna for the things she'd said in the hospital. Maybe I should too. But forgiveness wasn't something I could force. It had to come on its own, like spring after a long winter. Autumn arrived with cold winds and falling leaves. By the end of September, Brianna had completed 120 hours of community service. She'd attended 20 therapy sessions. She'd met with Scarlett twice. Margaret Sullivan called me one evening in early October. "Raymond, I thought you should know. Brianna is doing well. She's quiet, respectful, and kind to the patients. Mrs. Hayes asks for her every day." "Thank you for telling me," I said. Margaret hesitated. "Do you plan to see her?" "Not yet." "When?" I looked out the window at the October sky, gold and gray. "When I'm ready," I said. Margaret was silent for a moment. Then, "Don't wait too long, Raymond. Life is shorter than we think." I knew she was right. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee watching the stars come out. Scarlett had texted me earlier, "Brianna asked about you today." I told her, "You're not ready yet, but I think she's changing." I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. Kimberly's voice echoed in my mind, soft and steady. Family is worth fighting for. But was forgiveness part of that fight? Or was it something else? Entirely. Something that required surrender instead of strength. Brianna had completed 120 hours of community service and attended 20 therapy sessions. But the hardest test was still ahead, facing me. Thanksgiving 2025 arrived cold and quiet. 8 months after the trial, I set the dining table for 3, the first family meal since Kimberly's death. I started cooking at 7 in the morning. Turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce. Kimberly's recipe, the one she'd used every year since 1991. I'd watched her make it dozens of times, but doing it alone felt different. Heavier. Scarlett arrived at 11. She brought an apple pie baked from her grandmother Dorothy's recipe. "I need help?" she asked, tying on an apron. "Always," I said. We worked side by side in the kitchen, peeling potatoes, stirring gravy, checking the turkey. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. At 3 o'clock, Brianna arrived. She drove an old Honda Civic, faded blue paint and a dent in the rear bumper. Nothing like the BMW she'd owned before. She stepped out of the car wearing a simple gray sweater and jeans. No makeup. Hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger somehow. Lighter. In her hands, she carried a small bouquet of white tulips. "I'm for Mom," she said quietly when I opened the door. I took the flowers and placed them in a vase on the center of the dining table, right where Kimberly used to sit. Dinner was served at 4. The 3 of us sat around the old oak table, Raymond at the head, Scarlett on my left, Brianna on my right. Kimberly's chair remained empty. For the first 2 minutes, no one spoke. Just the sound of forks against plates, the clink of glasses. Finally, I broke the silence. "How's the hospice work?" I asked Brianna. She looked up surprised. "It's hard, but I'm learning." Scarlett glanced at her. "What do you do there?" Brianna set down her fork. "I read to patients, clean rooms, listen to their stories." "That sounds meaningful," Scarlett said. Brianna nodded slowly. "It is. More meaningful than anything I did before." Another silence. But this one felt softer. Halfway through the meal, Brianna turned to Scarlett. "Can I ask about your shop?" she said. Scarlett hesitated, then nodded. "Sure. I saw it from the outside a few weeks ago. It looks beautiful." Scarlett's expression softened. "Thank you. I've been expanding. Custom designs mostly. Wedding dresses. Formal wear." "That's amazing," Brianna said. And she meant it. Scarlett studied her for a moment. "Mom would be proud of you." Brianna's eyes filled with tears. "She'd be proud of you for trying to change." Brianna looked down at her plate. "I hope so." After dinner, Scarlett began clearing the dishes. Brianna stood to help, but I waved them both off. "Sit," I said. "I'll make coffee." But Brianna didn't sit. She followed me into the kitchen. "Dad," she said quietly. "Can I ask you something?" I turned. "Go ahead. Why did you give me that condition?" The 2 years, I looked at her. Really looked at her. The daughter I'd raised. The girl who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read bedtime stories. The woman who'd tried to destroy me. "Because your mother believed in second chances," I said. "And so do I." "Do you think I can do it?" she asked. "I think you're already doing it." Her face crumpled. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying not to cry. I didn't reach for her. Not yet. But I didn't look away either. At 7 o'clock, my phone rang. Craig's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer. But Brianna looked at me, eyes wide, and I nodded. I switched to FaceTime. Craig appeared first, standing in what looked like a small kitchen. He looked tired. Older. "Hi, Raymond," he said. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, I said stiffly. Then a small face appeared on the screen. 9 years old, blonde hair in braids, bright blue eyes. Hi, Grandpa. Emma's voice rang out. My chest tightened. Hi, sweetheart. Happy Thanksgiving. Daddy says I can visit you next summer, she said, grinning. I'd love that, I said. Emma waved at the camera, then disappeared. Craig reappeared. She misses you, he said. I miss her too. Craig glanced to the side. Brianna there. I looked at Brianna. She was frozen, staring at the screen. I turned the phone toward her. Hi, Mom. Emma's voice called from off-screen. Brianna's face crumpled. Hi, baby. I made a turkey drawing at school. I'll send it to you. I'd love that, Brianna whispered. The call ended a moment later. Brianna sat down at the table, hands shaking. I'm losing her too, aren't it? She said quietly. I sat down across from her. Not if you keep trying. She looked up at me. Do you really believe that? Yes, I said, I do. At 8 o'clock, Brianna stood to leave. She pulled on her coat, hesitated at the door. Thank you for letting me come, she said. You're always welcome, I said. But you have to earn it. She nodded. I know. Scarlett stepped forward. She looked at Brianna for a long moment. Then slowly she opened her arms. Brianna stood frozen, disbelieving. Happy Thanksgiving, Brianna, Scarlett said softly. Brianna stepped into the hug, her body shaking with silent sobs. Scarlett held her gently the way Kimberly used to. When they pulled apart, Brianna wiped her eyes. Thank you, she whispered, and then she was gone. Scarlett and I washed the dishes in silence. Do you think she'll make it? She asked after a while. I dried a plate, set it on the counter. Forgiveness is harder than anger, but it's the only way forward. Scarlett nodded. Mom knew that? Yes, I said. She did. We finished the dishes. Scarlett hugged me goodnight and left. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, looking at the empty vase where the tulips had been. Scarlett had taken them home to keep them fresh. Family's messy, I thought, but it's worth fighting for. That night, I sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet. The fire had burned down to embers. I looked at Kimberly's chair, the one we'd bought together in 1995, the one she'd sat in every evening for 28 years. It was still empty, but somehow it didn't hurt as much as it used to. Kimberly and I whispered into the silence. This is what you wanted for us, isn't it? The room was still. The clock on the mantel ticked softly, and for the first time in 27 months, I felt her answer in the silence. Yes. December 2025. 9 months after the trial. The cemetery was quiet on this cold Saturday morning with frost clinging to the headstones like lace. I stood before my wife's grave wearing a heavy gray coat, holding a bouquet of white roses. The headstone was simple pale granite. Kimberly Ann Fletcher. 1965 to 2023. Beloved wife, mother, teacher. Love never fails. I knelt and placed the flowers at the base of the stone. My fingers traced her name, the letters cold beneath my touch. The cemetery was empty. Just the wind through the bare trees, the distant call of a crow. Snow began to fall light and soft. I spoke quietly as if she could hear. Kim, it's been 27 months since you left. I finally understand what you were trying to tell me. I closed my eyes. You knew Brianna would sue. You knew I'd have to face our daughter in court. And you prepared everything to protect us, not just Scarlett, but all of us. My throat tightened. And I was angry at first. Angry that you carried this burden alone. Angry that you suffered in silence while I remained blind to everything. I opened my eyes and looked at the stone. But now I see what you were building, a bridge between two daughters who didn't know they needed each other. I told her about Brianna. She's completed 320 hours of community service at the hospice. She's been in therapy for 9 months. She sold everything she had to pay her debts. Last week she told me she finally understands why you helped Scarlett. She said Mom saw someone who needed love, and she gave it without conditions. I told her about Scarlett. Scarlett created a scholarship fund for single mothers studying design. She named it after you, the Kimberly Fletcher Memorial Scholarship. 5 women have received it so far. She calls me Dad now. Every time I hear it, I think of you and how you made this possible. The snow fell heavier. You weren't keeping secrets from me, Kim. You were protecting something I wasn't ready to understand, that family isn't about blood or money or perfection. It's about showing up when it's hard. It's about second chances. It's about loving people even when they break your heart. I stood slowly wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. Thank you for protecting us, even when I was too blind to see. Thank you for believing we could find our way back to each other. I placed my hand on the cold stone one last time. I love you, Kim. I always will. I stood there for another minute, then turned and walked back to my truck. I'll be back next week, I whispered. I promise. When I arrived home, the smell of chicken soup greeted me at the door. Scarlett stood at the stove, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a blue sweater. She turned and smiled. I thought you might need company today. I smiled back. You know me too well. We hugged a quick, easy embrace, the kind fathers and daughters share. How was it? She asked. Peaceful, I said. For the first time in a long time. At noon, the doorbell rang. Brianna stood on the porch wearing a simple brown coat, holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. Hi, Dad. Hi, Scarlett, she said. Come in, I said. It's cold. The 3 of us sat in the living room by the fireplace. Brianna handed me the package. I found this last week when I was cleaning out Mom's storage unit. There's a note with your name on it. I unwrapped the paper carefully. Inside was a gold pocket watch. I stared at it, stunned. It was my grandfather's watch. He'd given it to me when I turned 18. I'd thought I'd lost it 20 years ago. Attached to the watch was a small note written in Kimberly's handwriting. Raymond, I found this in the attic last year. You thought you'd lost it, but I kept it safe. Give this to yourself when you're ready to forgive not me, not Brianna, but yourself. You were a good man who made one mistake 42 years ago. It's time to let it go. All my love, Kay. I opened the watch. Inside the lid, freshly engraved, were the words, Time heals, love endures. Kay. The watch was still running. Kimberly had wound it before she passed. My hands shook. For 5 minutes, none of us spoke. The fire crackled. Snow fell outside the window. I looked at my 2 daughters sitting across from each other. Your mother spent her last months making sure we'd find our way back to each other, I said. She knew this day would come. Brianna's voice was quiet. Do you think she'd forgive me for what I did? She already did, I said. Long before you ever asked. Scarlett nodded. She forgave all of us. That's who she was. Brianna wiped her eyes. I don't deserve this family. None of us do, I said. But we have it anyway. That's what grace means. We talked for a while after that. Brianna told us she had 80 hours of community service left. She'd finish in June. Therapy would continue through July. Her debt had dropped from $485,000 to $365,000. Emma would visit next summer. I'm not the same person I was, Brianna said. I'm trying to be better. Scarlett shared her plans too. A second shop in Denver would open in March. The Kimberly Fletcher Scholarship had awarded $25,000 to 5 students so far. She was dating an architect named Owen. I'm building the life Mom wanted for me, she said. I told them about my week. I'd started teaching free woodworking classes at the community center every Saturday. Dinner with Scarlett on Wednesdays, family therapy with Brianna on Fridays, chess with Mrs. Collins on Mondays. I'm living the life Kim built for me, I said. One day at a time, Scarlett stood. I should start lunch. Turkey sandwiches okay? I'll help, Brianna said. They walked into the kitchen together, the first time my 2 daughters had worked side by side. I stayed in the living room, holding the pocket watch. It ticked steadily in my palm. Tick, tick, tick. I looked up at the wedding photo on the wall. Kimberly in her white dress, smiling like the world was full of light. "We made it, Kim," I whispered. "It's messy and broken and imperfect, but we made it." Laughter drifted from the kitchen, Scarlett and Brianna talking softly. I smiled, wiped my eyes, and stood. I walked into the kitchen. Scarlett was slicing bread. Brianna was pouring orange juice. "I need help?" I asked. They both turned and smiled. "We've got it, Dad," they said in unison. I leaned against the doorway, watching them. For the first time in 27 months, my house felt whole. We sat at the table together and ate turkey sandwiches. Snow fell softly outside the window. Kimberly's chair remained empty, but it no longer felt like a wound. It was a reminder. Love never fails. If there's one thing I've learned after 63 years on this earth, it's this: family betrayal cuts deeper than any courtroom ruling ever could. But it also teaches us something precious: that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the hardest kind of strength. I'm Raymond Fletcher, and I've lived through what many grandpa stories never dare to tell. I watched my daughter try to destroy everything her mother built. I met another daughter I never knew existed. And I learned that family betrayal doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of healing. God gave me 28 years with Kimberly. She taught me that love isn't about being right. It's about showing up even when it's hard. I failed at that for 41 years with Scarlett. I almost failed forever with Brianna. Don't be like me. Don't wait for a lawsuit, a USB drive, or a deathbed confession to open your eyes. If there's someone in your family you've pushed away, or someone who's pushed you away, reach out before it's too late. Grandpa stories like mine are full of regret. Learn from mine so yours doesn't have to be. Kimberly used to say, "Love never fails." I didn't understand that until I almost lost everything. Family betrayal is real, but so is redemption. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced something similar? How did you find your way through? Please share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to this channel for more grandpa stories that matter. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. It means more than you know. A gentle reminder: the stories ahead may contain fictionalized elements crafted for reflection and insight. If this content isn't for you, feel free to explore other videos that resonate better with your journey.